Welcome to a WorkingNation roundtable discussion. I'm your host, Hari Srinivasan. Today, we bring together 7 distinguished experts for 2 engaging roundtable conversations, shedding light on the intersection between disabilities and the workforce. These experts have gathered to share their insights and engage in thoughtful discussions on pressing issues. Our first table will delve into the realm of technology. Are employers leveraging advancements that promote accessibility?
We have first interview in 5 minutes.
And what about the impact of rapidly advancing AI on job opportunities, particularly for individuals with disabilities? Join us as we embark on this important journey, exploring the challenges and opportunities in the world of work for over 60 million Americans with disabilities. We're joined now by Taryn Mackenzie Williams, Matt Ater, and Hiren Shukla. Thank you all for joining me. And I guess let me start with you, Taryn. From where you sit, what can you tell us about the commitment that employers have made filling their workforces with more diverse employees? And that kind of core question, does diversity include accessibility?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And I would start by saying I am really heartened by the trends that I'm seeing in the workforce right now. I am seeing employers in the private sector, businesses of all sizes embracing talent and specifically embracing talent with disabilities. We have heard from the employers that we work with, we've heard from all levels of government because they too are employers, that they are looking to recruit, hire, retain, and advance people with disabilities. And they understand to successfully retain that individual once they are on board, that technology is a key piece of creating workforce inclusion. There is I call it a community of practice that exists across so many sectors where employers are working together to learn from each other about what it really takes to ensure that people with disabilities have access to accessible technology.
For the longest time, we'll start with the U.S. government was probably the most progressive around hiring people with disabilities. And now we're seeing more of the commercial world doing it, but where they've been challenged is how do they ensure that all of their technology is accessible? Mm-hmm. And accessibility it starts at the beginning. Can somebody apply for a job? Can they get through the entire hiring process? Is the job designed in a way that somebody can do the job? Can I actually do all of the onboarding efforts of joining the company, all the training? I mean, these are just basic things that a company needs, yeah. Right? And if they're not doing those things, and all of a sudden that barrier becomes, you get an employee who joined the company and they got through the first part and then they hit this one wall. And the challenge for most people with disabilities is they don't want to say that they have one. Now, I'm blind, so I'm going to walk in with a cane and it's going to be obvious I have one. Some of the other disabilities we're talking about today, they're not all obvious.
Hiren, you work with companies all over the world, and you started a Neuro-Diverse Center for Excellence at EY. And I guess first, let's start with kind of a basic glossary question. What does neurodiverse mean? Yeah. And what should an employer know when it comes to the entire category?
Neurodiversity is a really interesting dimension of cognitive variation in the world. So all of us are part of the neurodiverse population. What enlightened me 8 years ago is that somewhere in the range of 15 to 22% of the world has an inherent hardwired divergence in social thinking, communication, and learning style. And what's happened is that this population, often with a diagnosis, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, it's quite a large umbrella term. Many of these individuals are unemployed or underemployed because there's a lot of masking. It's like, oh, I'm trying to be like everybody else. Unlocking the power of thinking differently is transformative. And we think that's where innovation is. We think that's where transformation, that's where new product is and new process. And I think that's where we get that sense, am I really bringing my whole self to work?
Employees, when they come in, they have to feel comfortable in asking for what they call an accommodation. And some of that is a barrier to entry because people don't feel comfortable with it. Other companies, like some of these large companies, they're investing in getting applications and software in the enterprise so that somebody doesn't always have to ask for an accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at a company most recently, EY. They had purchased some software for people with cognitive disability to be able to do read and writing and things of that nature. And up to that point, they'd had 5 people ask for accommodation for the software. After they rolled it out, they had 700 people use it.
Wow.
So all these people who didn't want to admit that they had a need, they didn't want to ask for that accommodation, all of a sudden downloaded and started using that software.
And we found when we released such software, individuals where English was a second language were also using this. We said, wow, we never realized the application. And when you think about you're building something, you think it's for one group.
Yeah.
And I think the disabilities population is an amazing entry to universal design, because everybody says, I want things to be more explicit and clear and easier to use. So I think it's a great transformation avenue for companies.
I actually want to build on that a little bit, because I think what you're both talking about is making an accommodation process seamless, right? Like, we know that individual employees, if they're going to be willing to disclose their disability, we can't make it hard for them to do so, particularly if they have a non-apparent disability and they're concerned about stigma, they're concerned about shame, they're concerned that they might face discrimination in the workplace. But if we as employers provide the resources that they need in order to access those accommodations, to push the button and get the supports that they need, that can transform the entire workplace.
It also does something else, which is it puts the ownership on more stakeholders to actually make this stuff work. So the tech section of a company should be owning that in the end, because they're the one integrating software into a company.
Yeah.
Which is going to then force them to ensure that they keep software up to date, just like they do everything else. Recently, a government agency was getting an update of a timekeeping software, and they rejected it because it was not accessible.
Wow.
I mean, that was the first time I've ever seen, no, you can't roll this out. First time ever. And it affected hundreds of thousands of people by saying no. They're going to keep using the old software. And eventually that timekeeping software company's going to be forced to make their stuff accessible so that they can roll it out, because that's hurting them too, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm proud to see companies doing that too, because the biggest power, biggest buying power are corporations like EY, like the federal government. These are big companies with lots of people.
Yeah.
And if they told somebody, I'm not going to roll your software out because it's not accessible, guess what's going to happen? Company's going to make it accessible.
Yeah. I want to share a story here, and I want you guys to listen to this story. It's an individual named Andrew, and it really kind of pulls together some of the concerns we're talking about designing something better from the ground up, especially about technologies that we sort of take for granted.
I was born with muscular dystrophy. I was diagnosed at the age of 10 months old. I've been using a wheelchair now full-time since I was about 14 years old. So I've been disabled my entire life. I've learned to rely on technology to help me throughout life. I went to ASU and I received a bachelor's of interdisciplinary studies, and then I also have a master's of education. Everything I did was on computer, but as my disability progressed, it got to the point where I couldn't type anymore. I had an old iPad. I learned how to use my nose to navigate. When I need to magnify something, I put my lips on the screen and I open my mouth and it magnifies. My dream job was to become a school guidance counselor. I interviewed for a number of years and I just could not get my foot in the door. I was offered a job as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. And in order to log into the system, I only had a certain amount of time to put the code in to the iPhone, but I wasn't able to physically do it in time. Unfortunately, because of that, I had to give up that position. Right now, I find myself, unemployed. All the companies I've been looking at want you to be computer proficient. Now, I'm computer proficient, I just can't use the computer. Alexa helps me with pretty much everything that I need. turning the lights on, turning the lights off. Alexa also makes phone calls. It's to the point where I don't have to use my hands to even do any of the stuff that I used to. Like I always say, like Alexa is my best friend. I have a lot of friends that are very anti-technology. They sit there and tell me, oh, she's listening to everything, you know? That's fine, I live a boring life, so if she wants to listen, go ahead. To be quite honest, I really don't know why I'm unemployed. I could think of 3 instances where I was offered a job, and then when I presented them with my disability and asking them if I can use an iPad, the job was pretty much pulled out from under me. I would hate to say it's discrimination, especially in today's day and age, but we all know it's still out there. There are times that I do get very frustrated, and there's really not much I can really do about it. I can stay angry at the world, or I can continue on and hopefully find something.
You know, it's interesting. There's, one of the examples he gave is an accessibility violation. Nobody should have a timer on anything. I mean, this happens throughout school today where kids are going to school. If you're disabled, you have to have a time lifted for that anything that's timed because of your disability. And this is an example of an application that was timed out. I'm also just love the story where he learned his own accommodation. It's unbelievable that he has to do this with his nose and his lips. But I'll also commend Apple and Amazon and Microsoft for the kinds of things they're putting in their applications to accommodate for this kind of stuff. They, in the last 10 years, have done so much to give the power to the user to be able to do, what I would consider a 2-finger gesture. Well, he's using his lips to do what I would do with 2 fingers.
Right.
Everybody knows what it is to Zoom with 2 fingers. They go like that, right?
That's right.
And he's doing it with his lips. I mean, it's just a story that it makes you melt that that's what he has to do, right?
Matt, I think it is reflective, though, of 2 really important traits. Innovation. Boy, this population figures out how to innovate in ways that others I would have never thought about the lips. The other thing is resilience. In today's day and age, with all the disruption, you need a resilient workforce. And these are the attributes, I think, large employers would say, and any employer, who doesn't want that?
And you're both building the business case for hiring people with disabilities, right? The business case is not, it's the right thing to do, or we are providing some form of charity. The business case is that our consumers are people with disabilities. We already have employed within our workforce people with disabilities, and we have a responsibility to change our processes or transform how we hire, how we recruit in order to bring in more people with disabilities. And you can do it with technology. And often it doesn't cost a lot of money. I think there is a myth that exists so often with employers and even with individuals themselves that I can't disclose or ask for what I need because it'll be expensive and I'll get the no. But we know from our own data, from our job accommodation network, that oftentimes accommodations are free. Or if they're not free, the average cost can be $300. And that can mean that you have talent that you've brought on board that can do all of the things that we were just talking about. They can succeed, they can problem solve, and they can be leaders within their organization.
And someone like that who basically did his own accommodation, right? To be able to do something, figured it out on his own. That, I mean, it truly is somebody you would want in a company.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
we all would.
I mean, it's all of a sudden it's like, wow. But it is about, you talk about innovation and how important it is. If we put those same problems in front of, a bunch of kids at a school, they'd build something to solve this problem. Okay? I mean, in all the technology we have today, and obviously I've not done like an assessment and try to figure out other tools that could help, but voice recognition. I mean, today you can talk to just about everything.
You can.
Right? And eye tracking software. There's people who use their eyes to click the mouse now to type on an on-screen keyboard. Again, doesn't mean it works for everybody, but it tells you that there is technology But sometimes the barrier still comes down to some stereotypes.
Mhm.
So, Taryn, what is the potential government role in this? We all agree he has the fire in the belly, is just somebody who would want on our team. We see, for example, whether it's the FTC or the DOJ, goes out and kind of makes an example case and says, this is wrong. You shouldn't create scenarios like this. What is the Department of Labor kind of willing to say, hey, we're serious about this, and here are the edge cases that we want to make sure that you all are aware that this is what you have to do to start figuring out how to include people into our economy?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would say that there is not a single role for the government. In fact, it is a whole of government approach. If there are allegations of discrimination, if a person with a disability feels as if they've experienced discrimination in the hiring process, then there is a role for those enforcement agencies. But we also have an opportunity as government to be an educator and to build awareness. And that is something we do at the Department of Labor. We work with the institutions of higher education. We work with the large employers, with Microsoft, with Google. We work with developers themselves to ensure that they are including people with disabilities and the consideration of people with disabilities in every part of the life cycle of development of technology. There's a saying in the movement often, nothing about us without us. And I think it absolutely applies to technology and accessible technology in the workplace. People with disabilities need to be a part of that process, and government has a role in facilitating that.
The consumer experience today, particularly when we hit this Gen Z population, the 11 to 26-year-olds, 91% of Gen Z say authenticity is so important to me, I will make buying decisions based off of that. And so now, as we get to work with some great companies that say, we're actually going to do what Matt suggested. We're going to involve a user feedback and testing mechanism in the product in pre-launch. Why? Because we want to validate that we've actually taken into account a diverse set of voices and input, not just in how the product is used, but actually thinking about the developers who will use that product later to say, how usable is this to me?
We're in a time now where there are companies wrangling with how much do I need this physical office space? How often do I need to have people come back? I mean, we had this giant global remote work experiment that happened to all of us, and we all learned some things. And there are certainly benefits to being around a physical table in person. But I wonder how this sort of shakes out, positives and negatives. For someone like Andrew, to get to work at 9 o'clock, Andrew had to get up at 4 o'clock, right? I mean, we just completely, oh, wow, it's going to take me 30 minutes on the subway to get someplace. I take that for granted. If we could take transportation off the table, maybe he could do a job in a city for a company where he doesn't live.
Yeah, earlier I talked about being heartened by some of the trends I'm seeing in disability employment, and thrilled to see a closing of the gap that exists between people with disabilities and people without disabilities in the workforce. And let me be clear, that gap is still far greater than it should be, but we have seen progress in the last few years. And I think that much of that progress is owed to employers doing exactly what we're talking about, transforming their workplaces and doing the things that people with disabilities had been asking for years, or I'd argue decades. All of a sudden, the globe changed, how we work changed. And what concerns me now is that in the rush to get back to normal, we might lose the progress that we've gained in becoming a more inclusive workforce. And that won't just have an impact on people with disabilities. It'll have an impact on all workers, workers who need caregiving, workers who are providing caregiving to family members. So just like with the technology, we know that the policies that employers have leveraged over the last several years, they don't just benefit people with disabilities, they're good practice.
So I wonder, what is the kind of pathway that we can set forward for the generations that are coming into the workforce, right? The young people, especially with disabilities. What is the kind of landscape look like for them? So how, what do we-
I'll tell you, I mean, I think the new generation of workforce is going to be different. Okay, we grew up on a keyboard.
Mhm.
I know I'm calling myself old now. You know, we had to use a keyboard and a mouse and a screen.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's not the way they're growing up on screens, like straight up to screens these days. I
And they're
couldn't
using their
imagine
voice
in their voice and
Yeah.
things like that. And whether it's screens, smaller screens, and speaking to things, or AI driven, and it'll be interesting.
I hear you, Matt, and I see, voice transcription and translation and so many things are going to be enabled by artificial intelligence that could help the disability community. And I also wonder what the threats are. So both the opportunities and threats as we enter into what most experts in most fields are say is a massive change that's about to happen in the next few years, much less our lifetime.
I got to the airport and took a picture, even though I can't read the screen, I could see the screen is there. I took a picture of the screen with my phone, and the app came back and said, this is a departure screen in an airport. It has flights to blah, 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 in a couple places.
Yeah.
Then I hit the little button, I said, ask more, and I said, any flights to Atlanta? It came back and said, there's 3 flights to Atlanta, these times, these gates, these flight numbers. So now I know which gate I'm going to. I don't know if I want to live without that now, right?
Yeah.
Now, am I fearful that jobs could go away? I mean, that's what we've always said, but we need a workforce. Do I need a menu board as a drive-through for a person to do that when we're having a challenge of filling that workforce anyway? Or could I talk to the menu board and order my food? I don't know. I think there's kind of somewhere in the middle that we can do this.
Yeah. So I do think there's a threat here. And I think we're at an inflection point in our workforce. When years ago we were talking about robotic process automation, these were baseline blue collar type of very heavy manual tasks. We thought, hey, that's where the workplace displacement's going to be. Generative AI, 40% of that is focused on the white collar professional workforce. The massive reskilling that's going to need to happen here, we have an opportunity where we're either going to take people with us or we're going to leave a whole bunch of people behind. I'm optimistic about, could you take this disabilities community that's been on the fringe of the workforce, could you actually leapfrog them ahead into generative AI? Because in many cases, they have the resiliency and the willingness on change management. This is probably the hardest thing for organizations to do, right? Is the change piece. Generative AI is no longer about problem solving. It's about problem finding. Who are the best people to find problems and solve them? And I look at Andrew and that John and think, my goodness, who would not want an Andrew on their team?
Yeah, I appreciate hearing both of these responses because I think they, in lots of ways, do echo what we've heard from employers and what we've heard from workers and job seekers. There are promising opportunities that come from the use of AI. Absolutely. It can open doors, it can provide accommodations, it can cut down costs of accommodations, it can transform what the life cycle of employment looks like for a person with a disability. But we also know that AI often is as strong as the data that help form it, right? And so one of the responses that we have as a government is ensuring that we are not recreating algorithmic bias. One of the responses that we have as a government is ensuring that the ways in which HR professionals at large employers or any employer that is using this technology, that they are not screening out people with disabilities through the automation or deployment of AI in their recruitment process. And that is an education process. That is ensuring that we're bringing those institutions of higher learning, those employers, people with disabilities, again, themselves, into the process to ensure that that AI is truly inclusive and that it's not built on models that will re-entrench discrimination.
So just like you could use a filter to sort down 1,000 resumes into 5 based on the keywords you want, You could also use a filter to say, if this person keeps mentioning a wheelchair or academies for the
Absolutely.
blind, maybe don't show me those, right? So you could
Absolutely.
use AI as any other tool. You could use it to discriminate.
Right.
Well, as you know, as we think about how these large language modules, as LLMs are made,
Right.
with the data sets, they're going to use historical data
They are.
to do this.
They are.
That historical data will say, you know what a great candidate looks like? They go to these schools,
Mhm.
they have sports on their resume, they don't have breaks in their
Mhm.
employment history. And so all of a sudden the AI is learning, oh, this is what I look for.
This is what
Right.
good is.
This is what good is.
Yep.
To your point,
Mhm.
bias creeps into this. And now how do you avoid this? You actually get individuals from the disabilities community as part of the development and testing and user process.
This generation that's coming into the workforce is also less trusting
Mm,
of
It's a big one.
technology.
Yeah, that's the recent study we did. Lack of trust
Mhm.
scored very high. Companies that will culturally shift towards authenticity
Mhm.
in a very proactive manner, aspiring to be better, never claiming because you're always on that journey. I think those companies that involve the voices
Mhm.
of the next generation, who we've got some very interesting stats when we did this study on the Gen Z population. 42% of Gen Z are extremely concerned about their mental health and well-being.
Mhm.
Let me give you the second stat that's even more interesting. 46% of them, 4% more, are extremely concerned about other people's mental health and well-being, which means that they're actually caring more about others than themselves. This is pretty mind-blowing to us, but as we think about it, if we're not an authentically purpose-driven organization that has high belonging,
Right.
it's going to be a veneer that people
Yeah.
will see right through. And this is the digitally native generation that we're looking at,
Right.
which means inclusion for all and intersectionality, race, age, gender, sexual orientation, abilities. Like they're going to really demand all of it, as they should.
Yeah, well, we talk a lot about mental health at work. We talk about it because employers are talking about it. We talk about it because our own workforce is talking about it. In fact, just about 6 months ago, at the Department of Labor, we launched a new initiative called Mental Health at Work. And it was in response to what we were hearing from employers, what the data, there are data from the Surgeon General, from the NIH that show that the rate of mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, the rate at which individuals experience isolation or feel disconnected from their world, which of course includes work, that's increased as well. And what employers know is that an individual comes to work with mental health conditions, and in order to retain talent, they can't ignore that that employee is bringing their full self to work. And so they need to provide those natural supports. It is in their best interest, it is in the interest of the business to provide supports that can come in the form of employee assistance programs. And when you provide those forums to employees, and when you are open as leaders and at every level of an enterprise about the ways in which you will support individuals with mental health conditions, then you're able or more likely to retain talent.
So I wonder how small to medium-sized businesses, which is really the majority of the country, can tackle the shifts that we've been talking about today. How do they engage with this community that has been marginalized on the sidelines for lots of different reasons, when on the one hand they're putting out job posting after job posting saying, I got to fill these positions. And on the other hand, they're saying, wait, how do I reach you? I don't know.
So I'll say, as a person with a disability, I went through the Voc Rehab program. Okay, so they have people there to help coordinate getting individuals with disabilities connected with employers. And so if I'm a small business, I would highly recommend that a small business contacts the Voc Rehabilitation Services, whatever the term is in their state, because some are through Department of Labor, some are through Department of Education, depending on the state and where it's funded. and work with them and say, look, I'm looking to hire people. They're incentivized to place people into jobs, and they want them to be successful. And they're going to handhold you through that process to make sure you get the right person with the right skills.
I'm really hopeful. I hope the technology helps people
Yeah.
like you, Matt, and
Yeah.
I want to be optimistic and say that maybe there are opportunities here to include more people, and maybe these conversations also give employers some ideas and folks watching a little bit of hope. But Matt, because I'm a little bit of a nerd, I want you to show us the tool you were talking about that can read the board for you. 'Cause I have
Do you want to do the people, or did you
Yeah,
want?
you could just take a photo of us and then see what it describes.
That's pretty cool.
Oh,
Let's see.
Take picture button. Take picture dimmed.
There
The
we go.
picture shows 3 people sitting at a wooden table. They are leaning in and smiling at the camera. The person on the left is a man wearing a light gray suit and a white shirt.
Oh my
The person in the middle is a
goodness.
woman with voluminous curly hair, wearing a bright pink cardigan and a black top. The person on the right is a man wearing a dark gray suit with a white pocket square and a white shirt. The background is dark, and there is a light shining on the table, creating a reflection. It seems like they are in a studio or a room with professional lighting.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
That is
Yep.
amazing.
Voluminous curly hair.
yeah, you know what? I'm not going to lie. I mean,
it's just-
You know what? Thank you.
That
In
is
the
so
future, one of the things they want to add is thumbs up for me. But then I could say, is this accurate? Ira is
All right, I'll do this practice of our walk-in with Katie and our guide dog.
welcome back to our WorkingNation Roundtable discussion. I'm your host, Hari Srinivasan. In this segment, we'll explore vital topics, benefits, and job opportunities for individuals with
Okay,
disabilities.
panel 2, we've got 5 minutes until you're up.
We'll define and dissect the Social Security disability insurance cliff, discuss possible solutions as well as employment prospects that can help mitigate challenges, offering a path towards a more stable future. We'll also highlight the evolving employment landscape for those with disabilities. We're joined now by Heather Dix, Beth Keaton, Ilan Zambil-Chipau, and Katie Hiren. First, let's start off this conversation a little bit with a story about Jennifer. She's a woman who lost her vision and is now fighting to have a career.
I remember the day that I did start to lose my vision. This was around Valentine's Day in kindergarten, and the teacher had drawn a heart in pencil and handed it out on red construction paper. And I remember looking at it and trying to find my heart. I took my paper up to my teacher. I did not have the verbal skills to say, hey, I can't see this. The way it came out for me was, I can't find my heart isn't there. She took a Sharpie and outlined it for me and handed it back to me. And then there was my heart. Now I could cut it out and decorate it and bring it home to my mom, which I did, along with a note that I needed to see the ophthalmologist. I was diagnosed juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. That began my journey with vision loss. In 2011, I was working full-time. Had my own apartment. I was able to pay my bills. I literally woke up one morning and I couldn't see my face. I couldn't see a hand in front of my face. I thought, oh my gosh, this is happening. I decided to go ahead and get on Social Security disability. I worked part-time. I moved in with my sister to save money. I went to San Antonio Lighthouse for the Blind to get the help that I needed. And that's where I met some of the best people ever. In 2022, I was offered a full-time job as an admin assistant. When you're on Social Security disability and working, you have to make under a certain number each month. I talked to the person that offered me the job. I said, can you pay me a little bit less so that I can keep my Social Security disability? And she said, I'm afraid not, that this is the offer for this job. So now I am in jeopardy of losing my Social Security disability because I am going over the number. Taking the risk makes me feel scared, stressed, very stressed, not knowing if I'm gonna be able to afford the medication, the treatments, which is the reason I have Social Security disability in the first place. One medication, which was an injection, was $2,000 out of pocket, and I had to do that every 2 weeks. The alternative is not sustainable. I have been saving my Social Security disability checks because it could be $10,000 to $20,000 that I would owe back just because I wanted to work a full-time job. So taking the risk is beneficial to live a better life, like maybe buying a house one day or taking a vacation. If I were able to keep my Social Security disability check, it would be a relief. It would be a huge relief.
Can you pay me a little less? Beth, let me start with you here. I mean, this is something that we keep hearing from different people, that there's this cliff, right? But this is not what the system was designed to do, to ever keep someone like Jennifer from taking a job or feeling like she's risking something by earning more.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a very, very common scenario. There are a lot of benefit programs out there that provide a variety of resources for people, but they all have different rules. They all have different income limits and eligibility. And it can be really, really tricky for people to learn how to navigate even one of them, and exponentially more difficult to navigate multiple programs all at once. So with Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, when they're evaluating to determine whether or not you qualify or continue to qualify to get that cash benefit, is can you work? And when they're looking at can you work, they're also looking at how much money can you earn. So they look at how much money are you earning, and then there are certain deductions that if you qualify for those they don't count that from your income before they compare it. But the thing that's really tricky with Social Security Disability Income, or SSDI, is that the disability benefit check you either get all of it or you get none of it. That's the cash cliff. If your countable income goes over the substantial gainful activity, you no longer get that check.
It goes to zero.
It goes to zero. So it doesn't mean that people can't get financially ahead, but it does mean that you need really good planning to figure that out, because you need to take a job that can pay you more than what you were making on your disability benefit alone.
So if you were just going to make a little bit more, then it's almost a disincentive. And that's why Jennifer's saying, can I make a little less?
So in certain circumstances, you can get into a bad position where a little bit more money means a lot less income to you.
Wow.
Yeah. But it really takes access, I think, to knowledgeable people to help guide you through and navigate those systems.
Yeah.
And in the absence of that, what we see are a lot of oversimplification and misunderstanding about how the benefit programs work. And we see a lot of people who end up saying, I'm just going to play it really, really, really safe. And that can have catastrophic impact on financial and social lives. And I think that if we want to break this false link between poverty and disability, and I know all of us sitting here today do, it's really critical to figure out how to get better supports to people so that they can navigate these more effectively. It's very frightening for people who have depended on this for their livelihood, right? And it's their sense of security.
This does seem like taxes, but there's no 1040 easy form.
There's none. And I've said that for years. You're asking people to navigate a system that is as complex as the US tax code. There are benefits projects that are funded through the government, which are fabulous, but there is a very limited number of people who work on them. So I think the challenge for all of us is to figure out, how do we help people better understand the specific benefits they're receiving, get access to the variety of benefits that can help them, and allow them to protect what they need and earn every last dime possible to hold on to that benefit.
Absolutely. And so through our benefit navigation programs, we have the WIPA program, the Work Incentive Program Assistance, which is a Social Security program that helps with counseling individuals like Jennifer to make sure they understand their benefit and the work incentive associated with those benefits and how to secure their financial future. A lot of times what we see is individuals not knowing where to start and knowing the resource that's available in the community.
That's the other thing, I think, is that it's not a one-time conversation. It's a conversation that evolves, right? And as career opportunities come and present themselves.
Are there other options? For example, opportunities for training that might put someone like Jennifer in a more secure pathway forward, so she's not so scared thinking about, what if it all falls apart?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the workforce landscape is changing at a remarkable pace, and due to various reasons, and one of them being the technology advancement. One of the programs that we have is the Bridge Academy. It's an IT program leveraging Cisco certification, Cisco curriculum to have cybersecurity analysts, because we're seeing a rise in digital skills. And it's providing that next level type of work. But we also want to make sure that all individuals have the ability to participate in the presenting opportunities in this dynamic work.
Yeah.
So reskilling, the upskilling, it's absolutely necessary in order to be relevant in this current market. We have to continue with the ongoing education across the board.
I think self-advocacy is important too. For myself, as someone who got a physical disability as an adult, I still had the education. I still had the want to do my job. I felt like it was my job to go back and say to my HR team, this is how I'm going to get there. And the analogy I like to use is, there's multiple ways to get to 10. And everyone at this table may do it differently. But as long as we get to 10 at the end of the day, we've done our job. Exactly. So I think it's like knowing the tools that you're going to need to be successful in that role when you are applying and saying, hey, give me a chance because this is what I can bring. I can bring diversity to your organization.
As an adult, you lose your vision. When you chose to try to come back to the Braves, what did you ask for in terms of accommodations?
It was a journey. I was really trying to, as I said, educate myself on what I was going to need to get my job done and really have those tools in place. I realized there was a computer software that I needed, but I also needed a different type of computer, I thought. And so I went back and I was like, hey, there's this $5,000 computer that I've been training on. I think I need this. And our HR team said, are there any other options out there? And we were able to find a $150 keyboard that does the same thing. And so it's also weighs a lot less and is easier to take to meetings. So win-win. But it was, as we say, reasonable accommodations. We're meeting in the middle.
What does it do to sort of your expectation, level setting, or your attitude towards the company if they make these commitments to you?
I think there was a lot of education throughout the organization after my vision loss of just, okay, there's someone with a permanent physical disability who is now among us. She's one of us. And so it was really just a, hey, we don't know what we don't know. We want to accommodate you the best that we can. And, it was trial and error at the beginning. But now there are other people in our front office who also have permanent disabilities, and they still get the job done.
Every state has an assistive work technology program, which is similar to vocational rehab. And for employers who don't know what they don't know and don't know how to accommodate someone, the assistive work technology team can come in and give a consultation. And that may involve some training on the equipment. And the feedback that we get from employers on that is just their minds have been blown.
Yeah.
Because again, they didn't know what they didn't know, and that sometimes there are easy solutions and they don't have to change or overhaul everything in the company.
Do you hear about levels of commitment from employers?
Employer need to assess what's preventing them to hire an individual with disability. And is it policy? Is it infrastructure? Is it the environment? I like the idea that it's really education. The best trainer of disability awareness is the individual with a disability. You have to allow them to share their concern and experiences that will allow you to learn about how to give them access to the outside world. We're seeing positive trend with a lot of employer having discussion on kind of disability, diversity, and inclusion, because we throw diversity around so much, and rarely we spoke about people with disability. It was more of a background and stuff like that. So now we're seeing a positive trend with a lot of people taking on initiatives and including individuals with differing ability, and that's great. But all we're going to need at the end of the day is a pipeline of employer lined up to be able to say, I'm ready, I can hire an individual in my company, because I mean, again, disability is not inability.
Right. And let's face it, there are companies out there that say maybe they're scared to do it, but the reality is they already have employees who have disabilities and they don't even know it.
They don't know it. They've not disclosed it. It's the fear of the unknown.
Yes.
And
I think the loyalty factor goes both ways, right? And I think, again, what I would keep stressing is just the importance of getting away from the how do I hire a person with a disability conversation and go back to what working is really about, right? Which is it's all of us bringing our skills to bear, all of us bringing our skills to bear in an environment which is a really good fit for us. And we all need to look differently to figure out how do we begin to address that and how do we begin to answer that. And it's not always going to be through broad initiatives. A lot of times it's just meeting people and really looking at your company and trying to figure out, could something be going on here that would be of value to my company and to this person?
We want it to be a good
It's really
fit.
powerful when it
Right.
works. Right.
Because if it's not a good fit, let's adjust. Because that's not going to turn into a long-term employment. At the end of the day, most individuals with disability, they're navigating already each day, again, a world that was not designed with them in mind. So talk about problem solving. I mean, they're nature problem solvers. And if I am coming to an organization and I've given this opportunity, and all my life I've been trying to find this great opportunity, their commitment is great because they're not looking at the next job. I'm here, this is my job. I'm going to learn the skill set. So our role as an employer is making sure that we wrap around the support so that that individual can be successful.
So, I mean, how should I look at this kind of landscape? I mean, 20 years ago, we probably would not have had this conversation at this table because probably it would have been, you know what, I don't think your child's going to be working. They're not going to have a job. There's not really companies out there that could take them, et cetera. So on the one hand, I guess I'm a little more optimistic, but at the same time, I think about the labor shortage numbers and the actual employment rates for this community, and I'm like, wow, I should be happy about 40%. You know what I mean? So what should I be thinking?
I don't think we should ever be happy with 40%.
Amen.
I don't think we should be happy until it mirrors the standard population labor statistic.
When you look at the landscape and the history of disability culture and the laws, 20 years ago, we were still working on deinstitutionalization in some states and sheltered workshops. If a parent had a child with a disability, they were told they probably won't have a good job. Now here we are, there are so many more people that have gone to school side by side with a person labeled with a disability. They have a person in their family who is labeled with a disability. And so the increasing inclusion in social situations is spilling into the workforce. And that's why I think we're now starting to see it's not just diversity and inclusion, it's diversity and inclusion, equity, accessibility, and belonging, because people are having personal experiences and they don't accept you can't work or there's no place for you in this workforce.
We've got to somehow dismantle this pervasive thought, subconscious thought, I think, in many, many cases, that somehow if you're a person who experiences a disability, and particularly if you're a person who experiences a disability that has some complexity, or an intellectual disability or a developmental disability, you don't have the same needs, you don't have the same desires, you don't have the same opportunities, and you don't need the same opportunities as everybody else. That has got to die its death now. All people need financial security, economic security, inclusion, access to their community, access to meaningful lives. And I think as long as there is any kind of a belief or a perception out there that unless you are this person, then you don't need as much, I think that's what allows us to continue to give people very small amounts of disability benefits and ask them to survive, or lower the expectations that they're going to have a job same as anybody else, or not challenge our company to say, how do we encompass all of the workers in our community and really recognize and embrace the value that they bring.
Talking about a world that is evolving, let's look at things that have changed. COVID-19. A lot of companies found out that the remote work and hybrid work can be an effective way to doing work. That opens up opportunity because transportation is a huge barrier to individuals with disability. So there are opportunities out there with that. You talk about digital transformation. We just talked about the Bridge Academy. There is a lot of opportunity that's opening up. Atlanta is becoming a hub of IT work. There are tons of work opening up for individuals. So in order to move the needle, we need great discussion, but we need strong commitment, especially from employers.
Katie, did somebody ever say, why go back to work?
I had a doctor tell me that I probably should just choose another job. Probably just move back home, live with my parents, choose another job.
What'd you do?
And so I got a new doctor. I said, I appreciated the help that you gave me, but that wasn't what I needed. And I think one thing that we've all touched on a little bit is just also technology and the way that it has evolved over the past 25, 30 years. One of the first classes I took to kind of learn to use my iPhone again, I was feeling overwhelmed. I'm sitting in the Apple store at Lenox Mall, and the instructor put his hand on my shoulder and he said, imagine if this was 10 years ago. This wasn't even available. It really put it into perspective for me. Apple, when they put these tools together, they're like, we're going to build this software within this device so that anyone who is visually impaired, anyone who is hearing impaired will have access to FaceTime when that came out. These are the types of things that give so many opportunity to people just to communicate. But then it is evolving into, hey, these are opportunities for you to learn skills, for you to develop skills that can translate into a job. If you look at my desk at work, I've got 2 keyboards, or actually 3 keyboards and 1 computer. It's the most efficient way for me to get my job done. And embracing that and saying, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I need was just what I needed to do to make it happen.
We've got to set realistic expectation. That misconception, 99% of society, we think, if we see somebody with a differing ability, we think, okay, there are going to be some challenges. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Let them embrace the different. And when you hire somebody with a differing ability, you have to understand their situation, set realistic expectations. So your culture needs to change. Your environment may need to change to break down those barriers and be able to accommodate the individuals.
We need to think about equitable and accessible ways of bringing people into the workforce and understanding that if there is a type of test or assessment that a person has to take in order to get a job, that assessment might not work for someone who has autism, Down syndrome, or another cognitive disability.
And Heather said it perfectly. Number one, the way our job descriptions are written, our standard operating procedures, we need to change the way we write them. There's a lot of benefit of hiring people with differing ability coming from different background. You got different perspective, different insight, and you get creative solution.
I'm hearing some of these things and I'm thinking to myself, 60 years ago, you could have had this conversation about race.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That this is literally everything you're going. Listen,
Absolutely.
you got to stop looking at people that are different looking than you and seeing them as like it's like this is the last civil rights fight.
It is the last civil right.
Yes.
It's the last legal form of discrimination that we have out there.
Absolutely. It's the largest minority group. Let's just talk about it. I mean, and you're talking 40% gap. Disability employment gap. That's huge. I always say the challenges is not because of their disabilities. Part of it, yes, they face those challenges, but most of it is the barrier we have in society. That's the problem.
Right.
And if we can break down some of those barriers, it'll be easier.
Right. It's like there's an unconscious bias.
Exactly.
And I know this isn't about politics, but like
Jack agrees.
Yes. For me, accessible voting machines. We just got them in Georgia in 2008. And I've gone to vote in every single election since my vision loss, and I've only been able to cast a private ballot once, realizing these are things that just, we've got to keep talking about them, and then we've got to act.
We have to act on it.
Are you, I guess let me just go around and ask if you're hopeful, and if so, why?
Well, probably different than everybody else at this table. I'm working with youth.
Yeah.
And what makes me hopeful is that they're coming in with hopes and dreams, and they're having that discovery and the dignity of trying something and failing and trying again. And I see that vibrance and I see that excitement, and I'm seeing new careers come out of it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm enormously hopeful. I couldn't keep going if I weren't enormously hopeful. And even though it is disheartening at times to think we're still having the conversations we had 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago, I think everything that we've been talking about at the table today touches on that there really are seeds of change happening. I think the broader diversity and equity inclusion conversation has brought disability to the forefront into the minds in a way that it has not been historically. I think the technology is changing things. And I think the youth, and I think the people who have had opportunities at young ages and families who have been connected to youth with disabilities are coming out with really different expectations. And I think all of that combined has the opportunity to truly drive us forward in a different direction.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think for me, just it has affected, my community, both at where I grew up and at the Braves. Just seeing that this is someone with a disability who you can take this story and help change someone else's mind. Your neighbor may run a business, and hey, you can say, hey, there's someone who's visually impaired. If they apply, you should really give them an opportunity. I have hope because I think that it really is going to change as we move on.
Based on everything that we do at Bobby Dodd Institute, we are really transforming life because of the various programs we have, but not only that, because of all the business and services we have and able to employ individuals in those jobs. We've seen success story after success story after success story. So I'm hopeful for that. And also the positive trend, we are seeing employers come to us now, which just recent years come to us and say, I'm thinking about this initiative. I don't know where to start. And we'll sit with them to the table and we'll walk them through what it will look like for us placing people in their job, or what it will look like them hiring somebody, be able to share those experiences. So we're seeing employee coming to us and having those conversations because, as I said, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we're going to see a positive, we're going to continue to see a positive change. But again, it requires strong commitment from employers.
This is good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Well done.